when you speak English, you are secretly speaking Arabic, Hindi, Czech, Japanese, and Malay, all at the exact same time.
Yeah, it sounds like a riddle, but it's completely true.
Right. I mean, you might think you're just learning one language or, using a single set of vocabulary just to get through your morning commute. But the reality is far more expansive than that.
Oh, absolutely.
You are actually holding a map of global human history right there in your mouth every time you open it to speak. Centuries of maritime trade, violent conquest, scientific revolution, and profound cultural exchange just come pouring out into the open air.
It's incredible. We tend to treat our everyday vocabulary as if it's this static, monolithic thing, like a list of definitions frozen in a dictionary somewhere.
Exactly, like it's set in stone.
But it isn't at all. It is an incredibly dynamic, breathing record of human connection. Every single syllable you use has a passport stamped with a dozen different countries.
And that is exactly what we are going to unpack today. I want to enthusiastically welcome you to Dale English class. We have an incredibly eye-opening exploration planned for you.
We really do.
We are going to look into the hidden, secret lives of everyday words. Because English is essentially a giant, colorful quilt woven together over centuries. And our mission today is to uncover the shocking origins of the words you use every single day.
Yeah, we're basically going to prove that English isn't just a language spoken around the world. It is the ultimate global language because it was built entirely by the rest of the world.
So to understand how this quilt came together, I guess we first need to look at the fabric before the patchwork began, right?
Right, exactly. We have to look at the original earthy Anglo-Saxon foundation. Imagine early English as a small, rudimentary set of Lego blocks.
Okay, Lego blocks, I can picture that.
You have a few basic shapes, and you can build a lot of practical things with them, but eventually your world gets more complicated, and you just run out of distinct pieces.
Because the original Germanic vocabulary of Old English was intensely practical. Like, it was tied to the soil, the weather, basic survival.
Very grounded.
The people speaking it were primarily agrarian. So when their society started to evolve and they needed to express new ideas, their solution was to simply smash old words together to create new compound words. They were just building with the limited Lego blocks they already had.
Yeah, and many of those original Anglo-Saxon smash-ups have actually survived perfectly intact today.
Like what?
Well, think about words you use constantly. Sunbeam, earring, landmark, rainbow, butterfly.
Oh, wow.
They're entirely transparent. You can literally see the seam where the two concepts were just glued together.
But the mechanics of language mean that words don't always keep those crisp edges, right? Like, over centuries of people talking quickly, the sounds kind of erode, the seams disappear.
They absolutely do.
Take the word garlic. Today, we think of it as a single indivisible concept, pungent bulb you chop up and put in pasta. But originally, the Old English speakers called it garlic.
Which is such a literal description.
Right. Gar was their word for a spear, and leek was the plan.
So garlic was quite literally a spear-shaped leek.
A spear-shaped leek. That is wild.
And the phonetic wear and tear of, generations of farmers and cooks just simply rubbed the hyphen away until it sounded like one fluid word. We see the exact same erosion with the word fortnight, which is a standard British term for 2 weeks.
Oh, right, because that was originally 14 night, right?
Yes. But human mouths are famously lazy. We always look for the path of least phonetic resistance.
And they also stretched those basic blocks using suffixes. I know there was an Old English suffix, malum, which meant by parts or at a time. Centuries later, when the French word peace arrived across the English Channel, speakers just stapled that old Anglo-Saxon suffix right onto the new French word. And that gave us piecemeal.
Which perfectly illustrates the tipping point. The Lego system of smashing things together was highly functional for a localized agrarian society. But if you look at the entire English dictionary today, less than a quarter of modern English vocabulary is actually Germanic in origin.
Wait, really? Less than a quarter?
Less than a quarter. The language underwent this massive architectural shift. It basically stopped relying purely on its own blocks and turned into a massive vacuum cleaner, just pulling in vocabulary from over 350 other languages.
Okay, here is where I want to push back on that shift just a little bit. If we already had a perfectly functional system of building words, like if the Lego system worked for sunbeams and spear leaks, why abandon it?
Well, abandon might be a strong word, but I get what you mean.
Was this just linguistic laziness? Did speakers just stop trying to invent their own native vocabulary when they encountered foreign concepts?
It really definitely wasn't laziness. It was pure, unadulterated necessity. You have to picture the explosion of the medieval and early modern world.
Things were changing fast.
Exactly. The scientific revolution was introducing concepts of physics and medicine that just had no precedent in Northern Europe. Global maritime trade was bringing in spices, fabrics, and technologies from entirely different hemispheres.
Right.
Strict word formation rules just couldn't capture those precise, highly technical nuances fast enough.
So the lack of a rigid, protective governing body over the English language actually became its superpower.
Absolutely, it did. The vacuum cleaner approach allowed speakers to effortlessly adopt the exact right word from other cultures. I
Yeah.
mean, why build a clumsy five-part compound word for a completely foreign mathematical concept when the scholars trading the concept to you already have a perfectly honed, highly specific word for it?
That structural flexibility explains so much. It means the language wasn't just passively observing the expanding world, it was actively consuming it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And since that vacuum cleaner was turned on, it has pulled in words from across the globe that have been scrubbed so clean they feel 100% native to you today. Some of our most commonplace words have origins in the East that are just hiding in plain sight.
Oh, the Eastern influence on English is staggering once you know the phonetic footprints to look for. Consider the British Empire's long, really complicated entanglement with India. We absorbed an enormous amount of Hindi and Sanskrit.
Like the word shampoo.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, shampoo is a perfect example. Today, you picture plastic bottles and morning shower routines. But the word comes directly from the Hindi champo, which actually means to press, knead, or soothe the muscles.
Which means the original context had absolutely nothing to do with hair.
Nothing at all. When English speakers living in India first adopted it in the mid-18th century, shampoo referred to a full-body massage. It was often a therapeutic practice for coping with the intense heat of the subcontinent. It took over a century for the meaning to narrow down. By the 1860s, the physical action of kneading was isolated specifically to lathering the scalp. The word stayed, but the scope of the action drastically shrunk.
It's so fascinating how we just strip away the original cultural context to fit our immediate practical needs, which actually brings up the word avatar.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge one.
Most people assume that word was cooked up in some Silicon Valley boardroom in the 1990s to describe a pixelated character on a screen, or they just associate it with science fiction movies.
Right, but long before it described a digital incarnation, avatar was a profound theological concept. It is a Hindi word derived from the Sanskrit avatarana, which roughly translates to descent.
Descent, like coming down from something.
Exactly. It specifically denoted the earthly descent of a Hindu deity, so the physical incarnate manifestation of a god on earth.
That is beautiful. So early internet pioneers were actually reaching for a deeply spiritual framework. They needed a way to describe the experience of a human mind descending into this new, immaterial realm of cyberspace and taking on a visual, tangible form.
It is a remarkably poetic borrowing when you really think about it. But if we move westward from India toward the Middle East, the linguistic footprint changes completely.
Because of the Arabic influence, right?
Yes, the Islamic Golden Age produced massive leaps in mathematics, astronomy, and chemistry, and when those concepts eventually filtered up into Europe, the terminology just came with them.
And Arabic has a very distinct structural marker that got accidentally glued to a lot of our vocabulary.
It does. The definite article in Arabic is al, which is equivalent to the English the. When European scholars and merchants borrowed Arabic words, they frequently didn't understand Semitic word boundaries.
So they just smash them together.
Exactly. They absorbed the definite article and the noun as one single fused word. This phonetic misunderstanding is what gives us words like algebra and alchemy.
Okay, wait. If alchemy comes from that blending, let's look at alcohol. I know that comes from the Arabic alcohol. But alcohol wasn't a fermented drink. It was actually a very fine black powder used to darken the eyelids, like essentially cosmetic eyeliner.
Yeah, it was makeup.
So if alcohol is a dry cosmetic powder, how does that sequence of sounds eventually become the word for a pint of beer or a distilled spirit?
Well, you have to look at the mechanism of how that powder was made. Creating alcohol required a highly sophisticated alchemical process of extraction and sublimation to get that incredibly fine, pure essence of the mineral.
Ah, I see. So European alchemists started applying the term not just to the eyeliner, but to the process itself, like Did they start using it to describe the extraction of any pure essence?
You've traced the exact semantic leap. That's exactly what happened. They started calling any highly refined powder an alcohol, and then over centuries of scientific experimentation, the term jumped from dry powders to the pure essences extracted through the distillation of liquids.
Okay, so they were distilling wine.
Right. Eventually, the pure essence of wine, the intoxicating part, became known as the alcohol of wine. And then we just dropped the alv of wine part entirely.
And kept the Arabic eyeliner prefix for the liquor itself.
Oh.
That's crazy. So the word wasn't corrupted, it just followed the breadcrumb trail of human scientific discovery.
Precisely. And then there's the conceptual leap of the word zero.
Oh, zero's a great one.
The mathematical concept of nothingness, having a placeholder for empty space in a numerical sequence, was revolutionary for Europe. Because at the time, they were still struggling with clunky Roman numerals.
Which are terrible for doing actual math.
The worst. So the Arabic mathematicians spelled this concept cipher, which was itself derived from a Sanskrit word for an empty place.
And tracing the phonetic journey of cifra is basically like watching a word bounce down a staircase.
It really is.
It passes into Latin as Zephram, gets softened by the Italians into zero, gets adopted by the French, and finally lands in the English vocabulary around the year 1600.
Yeah.
It's just a giant game of global broken telephone.
Which is actually the perfect way to describe the vocabulary of maritime trade. I mean, the scholars translating Arabic texts were at least trying to be precise.
Right. They were writing things down.
But the merchants and sailors out on the water were a totally different story. They were dealing in sensory experiences, just trying to translate flavors and goods across massive cultural divides without a shared alphabet.
So let's put ourselves on one of those 18th century ships on the spice roads. Let's look at ketchup.
Oh, ketchup is my absolute favorite example of this.
If you trace the linguistic root of ketchup back to its origin point, you will not find a single tomato.
Not one. The journey of ketchup is an incredible example of how recipes mutate on long sea voyages. The word most likely originated in the Guangdong province of China as ketchup, which literally translated to eggplant juice.
But British sailors definitely weren't putting eggplant juice on their food.
No, because by the time the word moved along the maritime trade routes down into the Malay archipelago, the recipe had shifted locally to ketchup, which was a fermented, savory fish sauce.
Okay, so it went from eggplant to fish.
Yeah. And British traders encountered this pungent, salty liquid in Southeast Asia and realized it was absolutely perfect for preserving food on long journeys. So they brought the casks and the Malay word back to England.
And once it gets to Europe, the cooks obviously don't have access to the original Asian ingredients, so they start trying to reverse engineer the flavor using whatever they have lying around.
Exactly.
They use mushrooms, they use walnuts, and eventually, generations later, they hit upon a tomato base. The recipe was completely overwritten, but the phantom ghost of the Chinese word somehow survived.
It's amazing. The docks and trading ports were just massive engines for this kind of linguistic scrambling. Take the word chopsticks. It doesn't come from any formal translation. It was born entirely out of Pidgin English.
Which was a simplified, hybridized language used purely for commerce, right? Like between foreign traders and locals who shared absolutely no common tongue.
Exactly, because the Mandarin word for the utensil was kuai, which directly translates to quick. Now, to an English sailor, the pronunciation of kuai sounded identical to a slang term they were already using in the ports to mean fast, which was chop chop.
Right, chop chop, let's go. So the sailors understood the concept was speed. So they translated the meaning rather than the actual sound, referring to the eating utensils as quick sticks or chopsticks.
It was just a highly practical, chaotic linguistic compromise.
And this global back and forth sometimes results in incredible loops, like the word karaoke. On the surface, it feels unequivocally Japanese.
It is a Japanese invention, yes.
Yeah.
But the word itself is a rare double loanword.
A double loanword.
Yeah. English originally loaned a concept to Japan, and then decades later, Japan loaned it right back to us, but with a twist.
Okay, walk me through that.
The English word orchestra traveled to Japan and was adapted into their phonetic structure as okasutora.
Okasutora, I hear it.
Right. And then, in the 1970s, when the Japanese invented the mechanical machines that played backing tracks without a live singer, they needed a name for it. They took their native word, kara, which means empty, and mashed it together with a shortened, clipped version of the borrowed word okasutora.
Giving us karaoke. The empty orchestra.
Isn't that great?
It's an incredibly beautiful, poetic description for what is essentially a machine sitting in the corner of a noisy bar.
Yes.
And English speakers fell in love with the technology and absorbed the whole compound word right back into the dictionary.
Empty orchestra. It's just brilliant.
But, we don't even have to look across the globe to see this kind of phonetic scrambling. The mechanics of language evolution happen right next door. Look at what happened with Latin words that got filtered through the mouths of the French before reaching English.
Oh, the French filter is a masterclass in how human mouths shape sounds over generations. Since Latin was the bedrock of European administration, let's trace the Latin root caput, meaning head. Early on, the Old English speakers borrowed this root and maintained the harsh, rigid K sound at the front of the word. That gave us the very practical words cap and K, things that go on your head.
But centuries pass, the Norman conquest happens, the linguistic landscape shifts drastically, and the French bring that exact same Latin root back across the Channel.
Only this time, centuries of phonetic laziness in France had softened that hard K sound. The point of articulation in the mouth literally moved, relaxing into a soft she sound.
Right.
So English absorbed the root all over again, giving us the words chapeau and chef, the head of the kitchen.
So we literally have a single ancient Roman root existing twice in our modern vocabulary, sounding completely different, purely because one version took a detour through France.
The French filter also shifted meanings entirely based on cultural superstitions, like the Latin word monere, which means to warn. When the French passed it to English, it became the word monster.
Because in antiquity, a biological abnormality or a terrifying creature wasn't just a threat. It was interpreted as a divine warning or a terrifying omen from the gods.
Exactly.
If Latin is coming in through French and Chinese is mutating through Malay and Arabic is getting its prefixes permanently glued to the root, well, it completely shatters the illusion of a pure language.
The concept of linguistic purity is an absolute myth. I mean, it runs contrary to the entire history of human communication. Multilingualism is the global norm. Even today, roughly 60 to 75% of the world's population speaks more than one language.
Wow.
Borrowing and blending isn't a corruption of English. It is the core operating system of the language. It allows speakers to constantly upgrade their vocabulary to match the reality of a rapidly changing world.
It really functions exactly like an open source software project. You have a massive global network of developers. Anyone, anywhere in the world can write a new piece of code, a new word or phrase. And if that code proves useful to the network, it just gets adopted by everyone.
That analogy holds up perfectly, especially today, because this ancient global game of telephone isn't just relegated to history books. It is happening in real time right now and moving faster than ever before.
Because there are currently 1.75 billion people speaking English across the globe.
Yeah, a massive number.
The internet has taken that open source software and overclocked the processor. English speakers everywhere are constantly adapting the vocabulary to fit the hyper-specific physical realities of their local environments.
Consider the Philippines, for example. If a local invites you over and says they are going to cook in the dirty kitchen, a native speaker from London or New York might be completely appalled.
They'd be wondering why you don't clean it.
Right. But in Philippine English, a dirty kitchen has absolutely nothing to do with hygiene. It is a highly practical, secondary outdoor cooking space designed for heavy-duty frying and grilling. It keeps the intense heat, smoke, and lingering smells entirely out of the main house, which is vital in a tropical climate.
The environment necessitated a new phrase, and they just built it. In Hong Kong, the mechanism was translation. They took the Cantonese phrase, gayao, which literally refers to injecting petrol into a sputtering engine. They translated the concept straight into English, creating the cheer, add oil. It's a brilliant, visceral exclamation of encouragement. Add oil, keep going, you can do it.
You see the exact same localized vibrancy in Nigeria. If you are walking down the street and want a quick hot meal from a food stall, you look for a mama put.
A mama put.
Yeah, it's a noun born entirely from an imperative action. You walk up to the vendor, point to the dish, and say, "Mama, put this on my plate." It captures the bustling, interactive reality of the street market in a way standard English simply cannot.
And innovation is still happening by smashing distinct English concepts together. Like Japan and South Korea recognized a gap in the emotional vocabulary of English. So they took the word skin and the word kinship, and they blended them into skinship.
Skinship is a beautifully precise word. It defines the intimate, affectionate physical contact between parents and children, or the platonic closeness between best friends. It isolates a very specific type of human bonding.
Even the languages we label as dead are still actively participating in this open source project. Latin and Greek aren't dead. They are the living dead. They function like linguistic zombies powering our most futuristic technology.
They really do. When we need to name cutting-edge, unprecedented digital concepts, we almost universally reach back into antiquity. We grab ancient Greek and Latin prefixes to build terms like cyberspace, megabyte, and nanotech.
That's so cool.
We are using the exact phonetic building blocks of ancient philosophers to describe the architecture of our hard drives and microchips.
But this raises a practical concern for me. If every corner of the globe is actively changing the language, adding their own cultural code and translating their own idioms, don't we risk fragmenting the language entirely? Like, if someone yells, "add oil" to me in the kitchen, I might literally hand them a frying pan and a bottle of olive oil instead of understanding they are cheering me on.
Well, it's a logical fear, but the historical data points in the exact opposite direction. While these highly localized varieties absolutely exist, the most effective, potent words eventually filter up to the global stage and are universally understood.
Why is that?
Because they fill profound emotional or cultural gaps that the native Anglo-Saxon vocabulary simply lacks the bandwidth to capture.
So they basically serve as patches for human emotional blind spots.
Precisely. Look at the Spanish word apacho. It defines a very specific, nurturing type of affectionate comfort, often translated roughly as hugging or caressing with the soul.
Oh, I love that.
Or take the Dutch word gezellig, which captures a unique, encompassing sense of coziness, belonging, and shared warmth in a room. When English speakers encounter these words, they immediately recognize the profound human feeling. They realize their native dictionary is lacking, so they just adopt the foreign word. When we share ownership of the language globally, these new words act as a collective upgrade to human expression. They are a gift to all speakers.
Which brings us to a final, really profound realization to mull over. Your everyday vocabulary is not just a tool for getting your coffee order right. It is essentially an active archaeological dig.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
When you speak English, you aren't just communicating an isolated thought. You are echoing the voices of ancient Arabic mathematicians looking at the stars, Polynesian tattoo artists, confused British sailors trying to navigate the spice trade, and modern-day global citizens redefining emotional connection. All of that history is contained in a single sentence.
You are participating in a continuous, unbroken conversation that started thousands of years ago on muddy farms and the decks of wooden ships and is still actively being written today on smartphones and in bustling street markets.
So the next time you open your mouth to speak, remember that you are holding that vast, intricate map of human history right there on your tongue. Every word you choose is another vibrant piece of that giant global quilt.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining us for this session of Dale English Class. We are absolutely thrilled you are here to unpack this linguistic map with us. Now it is your turn to join the conversation. We want you to interact with us down below. Please hit that like button and drop a comment telling us what your favorite surprising word origin was. Did the eggplant juice ketchup blow your mind? Are you going to start calling karaoke the empty orchestra? Let us know. Be sure to share this video with a friend who loves a good mind-bending fact, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more incredible language secrets. We will see you next time.